Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Development Economics, and today is lesson 4. We're going to be looking at poverty, inequality measures, and implications. We viewers would you would appreciate what we mean by poverty, which we have explained earlier. Then, of course, we'll be looking at how do we understand extreme poverty. We'll be looking at how do we appreciate poverty in itself, and then we'll walk viewers through how inequalities are measured, what inequality is and how it's measured, especially from the coefficient of variations, and then the Kuznets ratio, the Lorenz curve, and then the Gini coefficient. It's not going to be calculations. It's going to be very simple that anyone who is watching can understand, and that is what I can assure you. That is what I am assuring you. So here we go. All right. Poverty actually is about deprivation of, especially an inability to meet basic needs. It's a deprivation of anyone or any group of people who are not able to meet basic needs of life. And basic needs are not wants. There's a difference between needs and wants. Needs are just food, water, shelter, clothing, maybe health, or what we call protection. Okay, so that one, once it's not there, then it means there's deprivation. That's poverty. Let's go to extreme poverty. Extreme poverty has been measured by World Bank as anyone who is living on $2.15 a day. Let me reframe it. Anyone who is living in the world below or below $2.15 is actually going through extreme poverty. This has been revised from the $1.25 a day that we previously used to know. This was revised in 2020, sometime September. It even went up from $1.25 to $1.90. Then now it's come to $2.15 a day. Okay, that being the case, so anyone who is living on or below $2.15 a day is in extreme poverty. But there are two forms of extreme poverty. There are two arms of it. One is the absolute poverty, and the other arm is what? The relative poverty. Relative poverty is the name relative, means that if a household or an individual spends 50 to 60% of its income, his or her income, or the household income, on satisfying basic needs, it means that no, that person is in relative poverty. Maybe for an instance, in the tropics, we don't need heating, so it's not necessary. But in the temperate conditions, they need heating. So if you don't have heating in temperate countries, then you are in problem. It's possible that you go through relative poverty. The other bit, which is absolute poverty, as measured by World Bank, is one that means that the individual or the group of people just cannot meet the basic needs. Basic needs: food, shelter, clothing, water, health. They just cannot meet it at all. That means they are in what? Absolute poverty. That being the case, what does absolute poverty does to us? One, it makes us lose our sense of dignity. Not just pride, but the sense of dignity. Self-esteem goes away. Two, it alienates us from social engagements. When families are meeting, they don't like to call the poor people absolute poor people because they cannot contribute financially. That happens a lot. Even community engagements, they tend to be alienated, let alone they having a voice, a political voice. That is also a problem. They spend most of their time either working as laborers or farm hands and earn meager wages. If they are living even in the urban centers, they are living in the dilapidated conditions. Urban conditions that you will not like, with poor sanitation, poor water. It's just not the best at all in the year, today being the 2nd of December 2023. But this has been going on for some time. Okay, so then we are not going to look at the absolute numbers, because we say the world UN tells us that the world absolute the world nominal figure for poverty is reducing to about 638 or 738 million. That doesn't mean that anybody should be left in poverty. Everybody should be lifted out of poverty. That is the goal. Everybody must be lifted out of poverty. Nobody should be in poverty at all. It's not accepted. It doesn't matter what religious background you are understanding, what religious philosophy you have. Nobody should be left in poverty. Everybody should be out of it, because we have so much resources in the world that can take us through. Once people are alienated politically, socially, economically, due to extreme poverty, it becomes problematic for those who have excess, because they are at risk of being abused for no fault of theirs. Social upheavals can happen. Social glitches can happen. Class glitches can happen. Such class glitches can be conflicting, and when they come conflicting, they can blow up into something that you may not like. Most of the coup d'etats in Africa have other reasons, but if you watch the way the people hail the coup d'etat makers, it tells you that the underlying cause to the people is poverty. Like Mali. Okay. So then let's move on. There are some countries that are going through poverty, but they have denied them. The politicians have denied them the thought. So I would say it's only in a country, say Ghana, that the government tells the people that they are flourishing and happy, yet the nominal figures is telling us that about 50%, 45.1% of the people are poor and living in misery. That tells us that there's something wrong. All right. So it's one thing making you feel that you are rich, but in actual fact, you're struggling with even food, struggling with water, shelter, clothing. That is not. Those must be needs, the basics, and it has to be satisfied. If that's not satisfied, then it becomes problematic. We have other measures that we'll talk about, multidimensional poverty, but for now, let's leave it that for now. If poverty, the minimum way of raising people out of poverty is income poverty distribution, and one of the sure ways which developed economies have used incomes to resolve, say, is they have identified the vulnerable groups like children, women, and aged, and they give them what? Income support, cash support, cash benefit. Countries, about 63% is reported to be paid benefits, cash benefits, every month, every 2 weeks or every month. In the developing world, about only 7.8% who are vulnerable people are paid cash benefits, and that is itself makes it worse for them. A paltry 7.8%. Those are issues that we have to take note, and that has been reported by UN. Okay, so we can go on and on and on, but then let's now look at what is inequalities. Inequality is just about dispersion. It's about variations. See, the word inequalities means that it's uneven, unequal. There's a variation. There's a gap. If the gap is too wide among people, what does it cause? Is it going to cause a glitch? If it's going to cause a glitch, is it possible that you could minimize it, but not necessarily taking from the rich to serve the poor, to make the poor rich and the rich poor instead? No, that's not the intention, but to take from the rich to minimize the gap and give to the poor so that they come out of poverty, not necessarily becoming rich, but they come out of poverty and the rich still remain rich. That is where the inequality gap is minimized. Say the UK, for an instance, or Norway. We look at it and we look at it from the Gini coefficient. The first part of these disparities could be within the country or between countries. Within the country, you could look at rural, urban, men and women, gender. That's within the country. Then between countries, you could be looking at developed and underdeveloped, or developed and developing. Then you could be looking at what? These are all terminologies that we see, but we are not too sure about. But soon we shall be very sure about them. If we are sure already, it's just a reminder. All right. Such inequalities comes with what? Income disparities, and so what normally you read as shared prosperity. All right. Then power disparities, power inequalities, gender inequalities, privileges, prestige inequalities. Then we have status inequalities, job satisfactions. We have conditions of work inequalities. We have self-esteem inequality, the freedom of choice inequality is also another. So these inequalities, when measured or put together, assist us in determining whether the gap between those who have it and those who don't have is closer. If it's closer, that's fine. You cannot have a perfect system where everybody will be equal in society or in any community. All right. So then we keep going on. Let's take a commercial break and then back. Yeah, welcome back to poverty, inequality measures and implications. We're talking about inequalities. We said that it was got to do with, I said it's got to do with disparities, variations, gap between one group and another group. So it implies that we have to be able to identify the groups. We have to measure them. Then out of the measurement, we can tell whether this has happened or this has not happened, whether the gap is wider or the gap is narrower. We cannot have a perfect system where everybody is the same. All right, so we're going to go through these processes carefully in a very methodical way, but in a simple form that everybody can understand, even if you are not a calculus person, calculation sensitive. Okay, so let's take the first one, what we call coefficient of variation. If you look at every dispersion statistics, you carry out the incomes of everybody in your household or everybody in the community or everybody in the country. Then you look for the mean, that's the average. And you look for the middle, the most middle mark, that's the median. You look for the highest occurring frequency, that's the mode. You find that per the scheme, there will be 3 points. They will not, most of the times they are not the same. And so if they are not the same, how distant are they? What's the difference between the mean, mode and median? That's the central tendency from each other. If you determine that, that's what we call standard deviation. Once you divide the standard deviation by the sample size, you have that coefficient of variation, and that coefficient of variation or variance is what we call inequalities. That dispersion is what we call inequalities. That alone can help us to determine how we pay the low income to bring them up and bridge the gap between the low income earners and high income earners in society. Another one is to look at the Kuznets ratio. Kuznets ratio, whilst looking at Kuznets ratio, let me show this income quintiles and then deciles. When we say quintiles, we mean a fifth. When we say deciles, we mean a tenth. So granted that we have individuals on this column, on the first column, 20 individuals, which could be households, which could be a nation. Then we have their income levels from low income to high income levels. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the individuals. Then the incomes from low income 0.8, which is a unit. You see, we get paid by incomes are in monetary terms. It doesn't matter if the currency is dollars or if the currency is euro or if the currency is CD or naira. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the population is larger or if the population is not larger. Let's get these conditions quite clear. We'll come to getting those conditions and how they are termed appropriately. So then the lowest income is 0.8 and the highest is 15. So you go through carefully 0.8 to 1.4, 1.0, 1.4, 1.8, 1.9, 2.0, and on and on and on. It goes to 15.0, which is the highest earning. When we take the quintile, that is, we divide it by 5, we find out that every 4, when you add the 4, 0.8, 1.0, 1.4, 1.8 will give us 5. That's the Q1, quintile 1. Then you go to quintile 2, you add 1.9, 2.0, 2.4 to 2.7. You get 9.0. You just add it. When you keep adding it, you add it down all the way down. You find out that per the differences, you would find out per the differences, anyone in the 4th quintile, those in the 4th quintile actually make as much as 51% of the first. The first quintile is 5%, but those in the 5th quintile make 51% of the income, whilst the first quintile is just 5%. If you even add the first 2 quintile 1 and quintile 2, you get only 14%. They take 14% of the income, shares of the income. But then the last 2, the bottom 2, that's the highest earning 2, quintile 5 and quintile 4, they take over 73%, about 73% of the incomes. So it means the high earners take a lot, as against the low earners, who are many, take less. And that is a wide variation. That's what Kuznets is telling us. We can still use that on the deciles. That is, you divide each of these by 10. It means that every 2 you add them up. Every 2 you add them up. When you add them up, you get 1.8, 3.2, 3.9, and blah 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 blah, all the way to 28.5. But if you add it up, the summation is 100. When you carry out the cumulative frequency of all the personal incomes, you add it up, it will get to 100. All right, let's take note. You see, it takes us to what we call the Lorenz curve. Lorenz invented this income curve because he thinks that, look, with these income curves, he can understand the disparities. Kuznets has shown us the disparity, but Lorenz can give us a better disparity. With Lorenz, what Lorenz is saying is that, look, you draw a curve. When you look at the chart, you take it, you do the cumulative frequency. On the horizontal, which is here, on the horizontal, the number of persons, income earners. Then on the vertical, the cumulative incomes. The cumulative incomes on the vertical. So you put it on the graph sheet, then you draw, and the line in between the two, the vertical and that's the diagonal line, perfect diagonal, that's the line of perfect equality, where everything is perfect when it comes to equality. However, when you start plotting the cumulative, the number of persons and the income, the cumulative income, it's a curve. That is the cumulative income curve. That's what we call the Gini curve. See, Lorenz came up with this curve, and Lorenz curve is just as it is. When you move to Gini, Gini is saying that, look, when you put up this curve this way, you now can shade this section that is in between here, between the shade between the perfect line, the line of perfect equality, and the line of Gini curve. When you shade that and divide by the triangle from 0 to this end on the horizontal to the vertical, that triangle, you get a ratio. That's the Gini coefficient. That Gini coefficient is a coefficient between 0 and 1. If it's 1, it means that the disparity is so wide. If it's 0, it means that it's equal. So anything between 0.5 and 0.7 as a coefficient means that the disparity is wide, the inequality is wide. Anything between 0.2 or 0.1 and then 0.3, it means that the disparity in incomes are low. These are formulae that you can use to determine income disparities of countries and households. When that is done, you can then now use that to redress inequalities and poverty in your country. These are calculations. The reason is that if you don't redress these differences, social upheavals, political differences, lobbying, the rich can, by the ways, most rich people spend on luxurious goods. They don't save. Middle income earners do the savings, and the rich people spend on luxurious items like private jets, yachts, traveling, buying nationality of other countries where they can move in, trying to put some money in safe havens where they can go and spend and enjoy themselves so much. They don't, jewelries and all sorts of fancy goods, they don't save that much. So it means that government makes a lot from them, but not much is saved by they themselves. What UK has done is that any amount up above a certain limit, which is high income earners, 50% goes as taxes. When that is done, it bridges the gap. So footballers in UK who earn £70,000 a week, $150,000 pounds a week, half of it goes to the taxman. And when that is done, they use that to cushion the poor, to lift them out of poverty. So the UK poverty rate is low. The Gini coefficient is not too high for UK. When we talk of Gini coefficient, you see the Gini coefficient for Ethiopia used to be 0.3, quite low. Ethiopia is not a very rich country. It means that most people are not highly paid and most people are not poorly paid either. Okay, that was Zambia, 0.57. Tells you that the gap between those who have enough are paid higher and those who are paid low is quite high. That of Norway is 0.26. It means that the gap between those who are highly paid and those who are lowly paid is low, it's narrow. USA is 0.4, which is quite substantively high. South Africa is 0.58, which is very high. What we're talking here is when you're using Gini coefficient, one, anonymity. nobody is good or bad, nobody is rich or poor when it comes to incomes. The second bit is scale of independence. The scale of independence is the size of the economy or the currency that is paid in doesn't matter. You use a monetary unit to calculate. So it brings everybody to a certain level of parity. Then the population independence. It doesn't matter whether you are China highly populated or India highly populated or you are Sao Tome and Principe lowly populated. You all come to the same ground for comparative purposes. Then the transfer principles, also known as Pigot-Dalton principles. Here, what it means is that even if you transfer money from the rich to the poor, the intention is not to make the poor rich and the rich poor, no, but just to close the gap a bit. That cannot be affected. So it makes Gini coefficient a much better measure than most of us would think. We'll get into other views. The implications are many. We could look at various views like lobbyists. The rich people do a lot of lobbying, and that we have to be mindful of because they have excess money and they can bribe their way into getting everything changed, the laws made in their favor. Justice will be bought. If you democratize corruption, you end up what? Democratizing injustice. The name is H. Kwame Faglo. Thank you.